Hello, everybody. So, ever since the inauguration, I've been wanting to do a bit of a breakdown of Biden's inauguration speech because I think it displays such a lack of self awareness and a lack of a basic understanding of reality and cause and effect that I think it might be worth taking a look at. It's kind of funny because sometimes people will say, Argent, why don't you do more political videos or why don't you do more videos about this? And obviously, people don't watch everything I put up because I put up a lot of stuff and I don't expect people to. But you have to understand from my perspective, if I've talked about something like a couple months back, in my mind, it kind of shows up as you've covered that already. So when I think about like covering hypocritical stuff the left's done or hypocritical stuff Biden's done or stuff like that, it sometimes slips my mind that maybe I should just cover it again in a similar way because people hadn't seen the previous one. So, at any rate, I'm sorry if that's kind of rambling and incoherent, but let's get into it. I'm not going to talk about, I think, anything like super controversial in this. So, I'm just going to leave this up on YouTube. And if not, I can always take it down and put it on Bitchute. So, let's just get started on this because this is some prime shit. This is some Kino shit. Okay, let's see here.
Vice President Pence, my distinguished guests, my fellow Americans, this is America's day. This is democracy's day. A day of history and hope, of renewal and resolve through a crucible for the ages.
I mean, I always kind of hate this whole like this is year zero thing. This is democracy's day as opposed to every other election previous to this, including the ones where there was no controversy. Don't worry, YouTube, I'm not going to talk about it, but it's like, it just irritates me.
America has been tested anew, and America has risen to the challenge. Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause, the cause of democracy.
The cause of China, the cause of shilling.
The people, the will of the people has been heard, and the will of the people has been heeded.
Well, I mean, technically that's not the case. Don't worry, YouTube, I won't talk about that. But I wish people would just be honest about it. I personally don't believe in democracy. As I've said on numerous occasions, I defended it during the aftermath of the election because to me, what matters more is whether or not morally good things happen or things happen that are good for my ideals. Whether or not someone legitimately wins the election is to a certain extent secondary, although truth is important to me. And if we're going to live in a society that's democratic and there's a system, I'd rather that if we're going to apply rules, we apply them uniformly. But I love what's implicit in this is it would not be democratic if I lost. And this is the case with pretty much anyone. People only believe in democracy when they win. I just like a little honesty about that fact.
We've learned again that democracy is precious. Democracy is fragile. And at this hour, my friends, democracy has prevailed.
And this is the other idea, and this is kind of the left-wing conception of democracy, is they try to, like, I don't know, it's really weird. I guess, like, if Trump had have won, it would not be democracy, because democracy is whatever I believe it to be. Whereas, I guess I do believe in kind of an abstract will of the nation, but it's not liberal democracy.
So now, on this hallowed ground where just a few days ago, violence sought to shake the Capitol's very foundation.
Remember when there was a Black Lives Matter riot and Trump had to go hide in a bunker and they tried to call in the military and the military refused to come in? And it looked like the American government was going to be overthrown by BLM. Yeah, I don't remember that either.
We come together as one nation, under God, indivisible, to carry out the peaceful transfer of power as we have for more than 2 centuries. As we look ahead in our uniquely American way,
United. Just keep that in mind. He's saying we're united, we're one country, we're one people.
restless, bold, optimistic, and set our sights on the nation we know we can be and we must be. I thank my predecessors of both parties for their presence here today. I thank them from the bottom of my heart.
I think this is something that Mark Levin liked to say when Obama talked about or I forget if it was Mark Levin or it was Dennis Prager. It was one of them. But they said, the people like, I love America, but I want to fundamentally transform America and make it like a European country. It's like, you don't want to fundamentally transform something if you love it. You want to restore it. You want it to be better. You want it to be a better version of itself. You don't want it to be something completely different. I mean, that's like saying to your wife, look, honey, I love you the way you are, but I want you to be fundamentally transformed into a man.
And I know the resilience of our Constitution and the strength of our nation, as does President Carter, who I spoke with last night, who cannot be with us.
The strength of our nation. That's why the Capitol's under military occupation. We're just going to ignore that. That's completely normal. That's how every inauguration happens.
Today, but whom we salute for his lifetime in service.
I wonder if that even happened during the Civil War. Maybe someone could post in the comments. Did that happen like during the Civil War? Was the Capitol under military occupation when Lincoln was sworn in for his second term?
I've just taken the sacred oath each of those patriots have taken. The oath first sworn by George Washington.
Was it?
But the American story depends not on any one of us, not on some of us, but on all of us.
All of us. Keep that in mind. All of us, unity, one nation.
On we, the people, who seek a more perfect union. This is a great nation. We are good people. And over the centuries, through storm and strife, in peace and in war, we've come so far. But we still have far to go. We'll press forward with speed and urgency, for we have much to do in this winter of peril and significant possibilities. Much to repair, much to restore, much to heal, much to build, and much to gain. Few people in our nation's history have been more challenged or found a time more challenging or difficult than the time we're in now.
Really? Is that actually the case? I mean, in some ways it is. To him and his buddies, it's not. To him and his buddies, this is great. America's never been more disunited. It's never been more diverse. It's never been more globalized. But like, is this worse than what Washington faced? Is this worse than when the Capitol got burned down during 1812, or the Civil War, or World War I or World War II, or the Cold War where nuclear Armageddon was around the corner? I guess.
Once in a century virus that silently stalks the country.
Silence.
It's taken as many lives in 1 year as America lost in all of World War II. Millions of jobs have been lost. Hundreds of thousands of businesses closed. A cry for racial justice, some 400 years in the making, moves us. The dream of justice for all
is like 400 years the new 6 million. Just saying.
Will be deferred no longer.
This is another thing. It's never enough. It's always year zero with these people. The amendments after the Civil War, what was that? The civil rights movement of the 60s, what was? None of that stuff happened. None of that stuff happened. Well, I mean, the new narrative is that electoral fraud has never happened in American history. So I guess they couldn't get rid of Jim Crow and the denying of African Americans the vote in the South because electoral fraud has never happened and cannot happen.
A cry for survival comes from the planet itself. A cry that can't be any more desperate or any more clear. And now, a rise of political extremism, white supremacy, domestic terrorism that we must confront and we will defeat.
It's domestic terrorism. BLM isn't domestic terrorism, by the way. Muslims blowing stuff up isn't domestic terrorism. What's domestic terrorism is people breaking into a government building and taking some selfies. That's domestic terrorism. Shooting cops isn't, burning cities down isn't.
To overcome these challenges, to restore the soul and secure the future of America, requires so much more than words. It requires the most elusive of all things in a democracy: unity. Unity. In another January, on New Year's Day in 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. When he put pen to paper, the president said, and I quote, "If my name ever goes down into history, it'll be for this act, and my whole soul is in it." My whole soul is in it. Today, on this January day, my whole soul is in this, bringing America together.
It literally feels like he used one of those like speech generators. Someone was comparing him to like John Henry Eden or whatever his name is from Fallout 3. Just because like John Henry Eden has like a combination of generic speeches, but his speeches are like coherent. This feels like they just took like a collection of random paragraphs and blended it together.
Uniting our people, uniting our nation. And I ask every American to join me in this cause.
Now, once again, this directly contradicts what he said like 3 minutes ago, where he said democracy won because I won the election, implying if Trump had have won the election, democracy would not have won, implying that the people who voted for Trump, like, I don't know. We'll get into this more later on.
To fight the foes we face.
Who?
Anger, resentment and hatred, extremism, lawlessness.
Well, you just called on that. You just said, like, that black people are resentful and we have to embrace their resentment and hate. Like, literally 30 seconds ago.
Violence, disease, joblessness, and hopelessness. With unity, we can do great things, important things. We can right wrongs. We can put people to work in good jobs. We can teach our children in safe schools. We can overcome the deadly virus. We can reward work and rebuild the middle class and make health care secure for all. We can deliver racial justice, and we can make America once again the leading force for good in the world. I know speaking of unity can sound to some like a foolish fantasy these days. I know the forces that divide us are deep and they are real. But I also know they are not new. Our history has been a constant struggle between the American ideal that we're all are created equal and the harsh, ugly reality that racism, nativism, fear, demonization have long torn us apart.
So unity, okay, so we're all about unity, but I'm going to demonize everybody who disagrees with me. And, like, we have to get rid of anger and resentment, but this whole speech is going to be about black people's anger and resentment. Okay.
The battle is perennial.
It's perennial. I guess Evola kins like this speech.
Victory is never assured. Through Civil War, the Great Depression, World War, 9/11, through struggles, sacrifice, and setbacks, our better angels have always prevailed.
No, they haven't.
In each of these moments, enough of us.
Yeah, but once again, like he literally said 5 minutes ago, the cry for racial justice that's 400 years old. So he said none of this has prevailed before, except for all the times it's prevailed before. Like, this is incoherent.
Have come together to carry all of us forward. And we can do that now. History, faith, and reason show the way of unity. We can see each other not as adversaries, but as neighbors. We can treat each other with dignity and respect. We can join forces, stop the shouting, and lower...
I'm going to be honest. None of this means anything because this dude supports abortion. It's like, oh, science and faith and reason don't show us that the unborn are people. God said that the unborn aren't people. Science, like when you look at a sonogram and you see the unborn, that doesn't mean they're people. I don't know if Biden supports post-birth abortion. He probably does in partial birth abortion. So, like, science would indicate that if a baby is in the process of being born and is viable outside of the womb, it's not a baby. That's what science tells us.
The temperature. For without unity, there is no peace, only bitterness and fury.
I thought there was no justice, no peace.
No progress.
No progress.
Only exhausting outrage. No nation, only a state of chaos. This is our historic moment of crisis and challenge.
It's always a historic
and
moment.
Unity is the path forward. And we must meet this moment as the united.
And this is one of the things I hate about these people and about democratic politics. There's always a crisis. There's always, you guys have to do this. You guys have to do that. We need this, like, national. It's always bullshit. They like, one of the reasons why historians rated Eisenhower low was because he didn't like going on TV and harassing the American public on a daily basis. And that's kind of the norm now.
United States of America. If we do that, I guarantee you we will not fail. We have never, ever, ever, ever failed in America when we've acted together.
Wait a minute, you just said that we had. Like,
And so today, at this time, in this place, let's start afresh. All of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again. Hear one another. See one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire.
okay, let's just listen to this again. And just this sheer amount of doublethink, the sheer amount of, like, lack of self-awareness here is fascinating.
Let's start afresh. All of us. Let's begin to listen to one another again.
Listen to one another again as your supporters literally ban everyone who disagrees with them from all public spaces. As people who support you, fire people who disagree with them. As people who support you, ostracize and jail people who disagree with them. We need to listen to each other.
Hear one another.
Hear one another. Like, you just gotta go, you gotta go and have the conversation in public. And the fact that you can't have the conversation in public indicates how much you have to have the conversation in public.
See one another. Show respect to one another. Politics doesn't have to be a raging fire.
Tear down all the statues of people you don't like. That's respect.
Destroying everything in its path.
Well, that's literally what BLM did. Is they destroyed everything in their path. Literally everything. Cities, statues, people.
Every disagreement doesn't have to be a cause for total war.
Yeah, but it's your supporters are the ones who literally declared, who seceded from the U.S. and declared their own country.
And we must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured.
Which is literally everything the mainstream media does. Also, what Twitter does. Actually, the irony under this video is there's one of the bullshit fact check things. I just got here, the comments are turned off. Just remember, when you buy stuff from China, this guy gets 10%. True. 30,000 National Guard there to stop Corn Pop. Look at this. Now, for some of these, I've seen evidence that YouTube has been removing dislikes because of just what. Also, just to call out, ABC News has 11 million subscribers allegedly. They can't even get like 1 million views or 500,000 views on one of the biggest news stories of the decade.
My fellow Americans, we have to be different than this. America has to be better than this. And I believe America is so much better than this. Just look around. Here we stand in the shadow of the Capitol Dome, as was mentioned earlier, completed amid the Civil War, when the Union itself was literally hanging in the balance. Yet we endured. We prevailed. Here we stand, looking out on the Great Mall, where Dr. King spoke.
Under military occupation. Like, dude, I don't think pointing to the U.S. is, like, the D.C. at this point is really a good indication. So we're supposed to look at D.C. under military occupation as being a symbol of how America's great. That doesn't bode well.
Of his dream. Here we stand, we're 108 years ago at another inaugural. Thousands of protesters tried to block brave women marching for the right to vote.
If only they had succeeded.
Today, we mark the swearing in of the first woman in American history elected to national office, Vice President Kamala Harris. Don't tell me things can't change. Here we stand, across the Potomac from Arlington Cemetery, where heroes who gave the last full measure of devotion rest in eternal peace. And here we stand, just days.
I like how he says that even as he and his party support destroying the monuments to these people.
Days after a riotous mob thought they could use violence to silence the will of the people, to stop the work of our democracy, to drive us from this sacred ground. It did not happen.
Yeah, but violence did work. I mean, Twitter, used violence to kick people off. The banks used violence to deplatform people. Your supporters are the ones who did it. And God knows I wish my side was in a position to do that, and we could deplatform you and all the assholes who supported you. But I'm not the one giving this speech.
It will never happen. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. Not ever.
Not ever. Literally, as the Capitol is under military fucking occupation.
To all those who supported our campaign, I'm humbled by the faith you've placed in us. To all those who did not support us, let me say this. Hear me out as we move forward. Take a measure of me and my heart. And if you still disagree, so be it. That's democracy. That's America. The right to dissent peaceably within the guardrails of our republic is perhaps this nation's...
No, but you can't, because your supporters banned everybody from everything. And even if, they go in the street and protest, the cops will attack them. The cops won't attack Antifa. Fuck no. But they'll attack them, or they'll get fired from their job, or they'll get ostracized by their
greatest
family.
Strength. Yet hear me clearly. Disagreement must not lead to disunion. And I pledge this to you. I will be a president for all Americans. All Americans.
Demonizing half the country, President for all Americans.
I promise you, I will fight as hard for those who did not support me as for those who did.
That's bullshit.
Many centuries ago, St. Augustine, a saint of my church, wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love.
Don't bring St. Augustine.
Defined by the common objects of their love. What are the common objects we as Americans love that define us as Americans? I think we know. Opportunity, security, liberty, dignity, respect, honor, and yes, the truth. Recent weeks and months have taught us a painful lesson.
Yep, they sure
There
are.
is truth and there are lies. Lies told for power and for profit.
And I've literally just proved in the last, what time are we at? In the last 25 minutes, I've caught you in like a dozen lies.
Each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders. Leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies.
By banning everyone who disagrees with us from every platform.
Look, I understand that many of my fellow Americans view the future with fear and trepidation.
Like you?
I understand they worry about their jobs. I understand, like my dad, they lay a bed wondering, can I keep my health care? Can I pay my mortgage? Thinking about their families, about what comes next. I promise you, I get it.
No, you don't.
But the answer is not to turn inward, to retreat into competing factions, distrusting those who don't look like you, or worship the way you do, or don't get their news from the same sources you do. We must end this uncivil war.
But you support banning everybody. Like, this is fucking nuts. I get that it's bullshit. I get that it's politics. But I have a basic commitment to the truth. And this is, in light of everything this man stood for, in light of everything his supporters have stood for.
The pit's red against blue. Rural versus urban. Rural versus urban. Conservative versus liberal. We can do this if we open our souls instead of hardening our hearts.
And banning everybody from every public platform. I'm sorry I keep bringing it up, but
if we show a little tolerance and humility.
Tolerance and, towards all the people who they kicked. By banning Parler, that definitely showed tolerance.
And if we're willing to stand in the other person's shoes, as my mom would say, just for a moment, stand in their shoes. Because here's the thing about life. There's no accounting for what fate will deal you. Some days, when you need a hand.
How can you stand in another person's shoes if you ban the viewpoints of everybody you disagree with?
There are other days when we're called to lend a hand. That's how it has to be. That's what we do for one another. And if
we're in full
we are this way, our country will be stronger, more prosperous, more ready for the future. And we can still disagree. My fellow Americans, in the work ahead of us, we're going to need each other.
I mean, once again, if my side was in power, I would support censorship and political purges and that kind of thing. But I'm honest about that. As I said, I support freedom of speech and anti-censorship as purely a tactical, strategic thing. But I'm not claiming that it's like a completely principled stance like this dude is. I'm judging him based on his own words and his own fake values, not on mine.
We need all our strength to persevere through this dark winter. We're entering what may be the toughest and deadliest period of the virus. We must set aside politics and finally face this pandemic as one nation. One nation. And I promise you this, as the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh together. Look, folks, all my colleagues I serve with in the House and the Senate up here, we all understand the world is watching all of us today. So here's my message to those beyond our borders. America has been tested, and we've come out stronger for it. We will repair our alliances and engage with the world once again, not to meet yesterday's challenges, but today's and tomorrow's challenges.
I like how Trump not starting any major foreign wars was like a bad thing to these people.
And will lead not merely by the example of our power, but by the power of our example. We'll
By starting
strong
wars.
And trusted partner for peace, progress, and security. Look, you all know we've been through so much in this nation. And in my first act as president, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silent prayer. Remember all those who we lost in this past year to the pandemic. For those who've lost their lives in the growing inequity, the sting of systemic racism, a climate in crisis, America's role in the world. Any one of these would be enough to challenge us.
I love the America's role in the world thing. How Trump not starting any wars means an erosion of America's role in the world.
Profound ways. But the fact is, we face them all at once, presenting this nation with one of the gravest responsibilities we've had.
Okay, so we're just on full-on, like, rambling, repeating mode.
Now, you and I, by how we resolve these questions, will we master this rare and difficult hour? I believe we must. I'm sure you do as well. I believe we will. And when we do, a story that might sound something like a song that means a lot to me. It's called American Anthem. There's one verse.
Okay, I can't take it. This kind of reminds me, let me see here. This reminds me of something else Sharpton did. And I think we've largely covered this. Everything I wanted to say about this nonsense, but let's just watch this.
People, tonight is the measure of whether the country begins in the state of Wisconsin a national drive to push back, or whether we have more to go to build a movement of resistance. But resist we much. We must and we will much about that be committed.
Amen. I think that covers everything. So remember, everybody, the best way to achieve unity is banning everybody you disagree with from every platform, forcing them into their own little ghettos, and making them more resentful. That's the way to build national unity. That's what Uncle Joe says, and what Uncle Joe says goes.